Okay.
Well, welcome everyone to our family summer training series, Empowering Family Leaders, Hope for the Future. This training is sponsored by Iowa Family Leadership Training Institute, who makes its home in Child Health Specialty Clinics, the Division of Child and Community Health at University of Iowa Stead Family Children's Hospital. IFLTI is in its 6th year and has graduated over 50 families from its 4-session formal training, and in addition offers regional and virtual hourly training sessions like this one.
Bienvenidos a nuestra serie de formación familiar de verano, empoderando a los líderes familiares. Esperanza para el futuro. Esta formación está siendo patrocinada por el Instituto de Formación de Líderes Familiares de Iowa, que tiene su sede en las clínicas de especialidad de salud infantil.
Okay, and we're happy to have Monica, our Spanish interpreter today from Hands Up Communication. And Spanish speakers are invited to join in on the Spanish interpretation channel. You can see the instructions for that on this slide if you're not familiar. Give you just a second to get switched over there if need be. Great, and then just to review a little Zoom etiquette, as we've done in the past for today's session, we ask that you would please keep your microphones muted unless you're speaking. If at all possible, we'd love for you to keep your video on. We'd love to see you and see who we're chatting with today. And then if you have questions throughout today, feel free to drop those in the chat feature, and we will hang on to those for the discussion period, or Diane can entertain those questions throughout today's presentation as she's able. So I think with that, we're ready to begin. This session is entitled Facilitation Tips and Tricks. And today we're going to think about meetings and support groups that we lead, or maybe would be interested in leading in the future. And we'll learn to create inclusive environments, to keep discussions constructive, and to encourage and manage participants so that everybody benefits from our experiences. So to lead us in that conversation today, we have Diane Brenneman. Diane is a family navigator with Child Health Specialty Clinics and the division training director. She farms with her husband and 2 adult children, who both decided to get married during the pandemic. Her children have diagnoses of ADHD and anxiety. And in addition to her current role, Diane has been an elementary teacher, a seminary dean, and a pastor. Diane is passionate about creating safe and meaningful groups that also have a little fun. I can vouch for that, being with Diane. So I'm happy to turn things over to Diane today. So take it away, Diane.
Well, thank you, Jody. I'm delighted to be with you today. And this whole series, really, as we're thinking of ourselves as leaders. And today we want to think about ourselves as leaders of groups. I've been facilitating in my various careers for over 30 years. And I've learned some tips and tricks, and I'd like to pass them along to you today and see if they work for you. And then in the discussion time, learn some of your tricks and experiences, and maybe some things that didn't go so well, and we'll talk about it together. See what we can come up with as a problem solving. So before we begin, I'd like to see what kind of experience you've had, what kind of groups you've had. So you can see the poll here. And you can just click the answers, whether you've attended a meeting, been leader of a meeting, and check all that apply at the bottom. If you are on your phone, kind of touch toward the bottom of the Zoom screen and more options will come up. Maybe you'll see the poll. If that doesn't work, try swiping on your phone and the poll might come up. I see a lot of us have been in meetings. Some of us have been the leader. I'll just give you another minute to answer. Looks like maybe everybody who can find the poll has answered. So let me end it and take a look here what we said. So many of us have attended meetings, and some of us have been leaders. Yes, some of us have attended meetings. Some of us have been leaders. Many of us have been leaders of many groups. Some of us have been leaders of some groups, and a couple of us have not been leaders at all of a group. And there's a range of how we've felt in meetings. We felt safe. We felt unsafe. We felt heard. We also experienced that a few people did all the talking. We've experienced that members collaborated. But we've also experienced that we just did what the leader wanted. Okay. Thank you for that. And then I'd like us to think about the type of meeting that we might facilitate. Here's a couple that I thought of, and if you can think of a different one, go ahead and chat it in. Families lead advisory groups where there's parent input for healthcare or school. Families lead support groups for children of parents of children with disabilities and others. Parents lead planning groups. Maybe you're planning a sensory friendly event or a disability awareness event. And then families also lead advocacy groups where you're working together to make a plan to bring about change. I'm looking in the chat. Does anybody think of another kind of group that you might facilitate? And Monica, if someone answers you can just type it in and Jody can read it here out for us. A group for teens with special needs to explore being a teenager. Wow. Great group. Okay, so there are lots of different opportunities for us to plan groups. And now I'd like us to think about what is it that makes a good meeting? When we go home and we say, that was a good meeting, what is it about that? And so if you look on your Zoom and click view options and hit annotate. And then there's a button down here called text. So if you can select that, you can actually write on the screen what you think makes a good meeting. If you're like me, you can't type when you're being watched. Okay. Learning happens. Everybody's collaborating. There's positive group dynamics for sure. Discussion without judgment, nice. when people share. Yvonne, just put it in the chat if you can't get your annotation going. I believe the Spanish said when we have confidence and we have good communication and we focus and want to, I can't remember that verb. Okay. I'm not sure if anybody, respect for all voices, nice. A clear focus, I'm not sure anybody puts that. Everybody's collaborating. We call that sharing the air, where not everybody is just one person talking. We have learning, organized, and I'd like to add safe too. And we'll talk a little bit more about what safety is in a group in a bit. Okay. So much of our experience in groups, good or bad, depends on the leader of the group. A facilitator is one who makes it easy or eases a process. That's actually the definition of facilitate, is to ease the process. Much of this happens in advanced planning, but there's also an art to being present with the group, sensing what they need and having the courage to act to adjust things accordingly. A facilitator ensures that the group's objectives are met effectively with clear thinking, good participation, and full buy-in from everybody involved. Facilitator eases the process, makes it easy. The facilitator also plans, especially if you're a new leader, a new facilitator. So a lot of facilitators right away think about logistics, as we should. The date, the time, the facility, maybe how we're going to arrange the seats in the group. Are we going to be in a circle? Are we going to be in classroom style? Are we going to be in couches? And the agenda. But too many times we stop there. And a good facilitator is thoughtful about the content of the meeting too. What are our goals? What do we really want to accomplish when we're together here? What are the methods used to get there? And then the part we often forget, the evaluation. How will we know if we accomplished our goals? How will we know if it's a good meeting? You could build in a brief, how did we do discussion just before the end of the meeting. You could do a more formal survey. Most important is just to ask the participants how it went and ask their suggestions to improve. How will you know if you facilitate well? Well, a little facilitator test is, you'll know you did well if people hardly realize you're there. Now you might be saying, what? Aren't leaders front and center, setting the vision, inspiring people towards a goal? Yes, leaders do all those activities, but facilitators' focus is on the group. What does the group need? Not what I need. What does the group need? And how can I arrange circumstances so that everyone in the group gets something valuable out of our time together? You'll know you have done a good job as a facilitator if people hardly realize that you're there. A facilitator plans and a facilitator guides. So you've thought ahead, you know where you're meeting, how long, what you hope to accomplish in the meeting, and then comes the art of facilitating. That part you can't really plan because you don't know what's going to happen. So do you just wing it? Hope for the best? Maybe. And that can work for you. But let's review some tips and tricks that you can practice ahead of time that are useful when guiding a group. And I call this the facilitator toolbox. One of your best tools is ground rules. Some people call them a comfort contract, gathering guidelines. People often skip these for lack of time, but you may be sorry if you do. Establishing parameters to the meeting will give you something useful to use if you need to address undesirable behavior. Ground rules also provide a type of boundary for the group. People may feel safer knowing that you as a facilitator will intervene if an agreed upon guideline is not followed. This can help build trust and caring in your group. And I think this is particularly important for support groups. So you might say, well, how do I respond as facilitator when somebody steps over or outside the guidelines? Well, one thing you can do is remind the whole group of the guidelines without singling out that one person. You could problem solve with the group. You can say, I noticed this and thus is happening. The guidelines we agreed to said such and so. I want to check with you how this is impacting the group. And you can check with yourself, how is this impacting you as a facilitator? I know when a guideline is to arrive on time or come back on time after break, and participants don't come back. 10, 15 minutes later, it really impacts me as facilitator. What's happening, or how am I going to cover everything we have planned? So it's okay to say as a facilitator, you know, we said we agreed to start and stop on time, and I noticed people aren't coming back. Is that something we can address together? And 9 times out of 10, once you address it in that way, people will come back after the next break. So you can ask, do we need to adjust the guidelines if this is happening? Just calling to mind like that will help. Another thing you can do is let's say this is an ongoing meeting, like a support group. Each time you meet, review those ground rules at the beginning and ask people, are there other things you'd like to add? Take away, how is this working? If you do that as a routine, then if something comes up, like side conversations are always happening, you can add that to the guidelines at the beginning of the next meeting without seeming like you're really drawing attention to that, because it's just the routine. We're calling to attention our ground rules. And one I'd like to add this week is let's keep the side comments to a minimum. Okay. Another thing you can do is if there's a person who's, let's say, doing all the talking, you can meet with them, and you've said as a guideline, share the air. Okay, let everybody participate. You could meet privately with the person and say, I notice you've been doing a lot of talking. You have great ideas, but I'm wondering if you're aware that other people aren't having a chance. Okay. Give them space to respond. And you can say, you might remember our guidelines said we were going to try to share the air. Okay. So those are some ways you can use those guidelines. And I will say facilitating requires bravery. And remember, you're doing it on behalf of the group so that everybody can have a good experience. Here's a couple other, oh, there's that difficult person coming in there. Here's a couple sample guidelines. Speak from your own experience. Confidentiality. we call this stepping up and stepping back. If you tend to be a shy person who doesn't speak much, you commit yourself to trying to speak up. And if you're a person who it's easy to talk, like me, you commit to, I'm going to step back and let other people talk. Another trick you can offer people who share a lot is challenge them or challenge the whole group to let 2 different people talk before you share another idea. It's just a little awareness trick to help people be aware of how much of the air they're taking up. There's these 2 from leadership coaches, Janine Hill and Chris Risley. I really like these. There's ways to make place a safe space. And over to the right, a brave space, taking risks, owning your intent. And then there's in the middle of that Venn diagram, things that are both brave and safe: respect, vulnerability, courage, and active participation. And I will give you a copy of these slides if you want to use them in the future. Rachel's going to drop in the chat that circle of trust touch tones. You got this as an attachment this week. This is from Parker Palmer, and he's a leadership coach, and he was holding a retreat that he used these. They're really growth oriented. If people followed these front and back guidelines, it'd be the easiest group to facilitate in the world. Because this was like a retreat, I think these touchstones require probably a higher level of commitment to the group than some might be. But you could begin each meeting, if you're having an ongoing support group, but choosing one stone and just talking about it a little bit. What does it mean to be as present as be present as fully as possible? Or you can draw some of these ideas for your own ground rules, such as no advice giving or fixing. Rachel will also drop in the chat another poster, I think she's done already, that comes from the Institute of Child Nutrition in University of Mississippi. If you don't have time to generate your own with your group, you can share this with the group and say, can we agree to these guidelines? Show up on time, come prepared, listen with an open mind, attack the person, not the problem, and so on and so forth. So ground rules are a great tool in your toolbox. The next tool in the facilitator toolbox is to think about the environment. We want our culturally responsive groups. We want our groups to be culturally responsive so that all families will feel welcome in their leadership activities. And Soumya Palreddy is a facilitator and trainer, and she, I want to give her credit for these slides. Just get this out of the way so I can read it. She says a culturally responsible classroom culture exists when people are seen, valued, cared for, and respected as their full selves. We could say we want people to be culturally safe. And I'd like you to put in the chat what might happen in a group that would make you feel unsafe. What might make someone feel culturally unsafe? Racist comments. Your ideas or views are respected or diminished. Yep. We've been in those groups where you keep saying things and nobody acknowledges what you say, right? And you wonder, is it me? Judgment. Yeah. I think another one is not knowing the unspoken rules of the culture. You know, what I don't know what is acceptable or unacceptable here. Well, to go along with that, racist comments when people make generalizations about another culture or status, or when people do what's called othering and say, well, those people do such and so. Well, those people are always such and such. Those stereotypes can be very harmful. A couple of weeks ago, Derek and Diane helped us understand their cultures. And we encourage people to speak from their own cultural lens. And as our country grows in cultural awareness, it should not surprise us that someone might say something offensive. Yes, respecting cultures is important. Thank you, Diane. Oops. So let's say someone says something offensive. Let's say a person says, well, you know, welfare parents don't care about their children's education. How do you respond to that as a facilitator? I recommend this article by Loretta Ross, which is called Calling In versus Calling Out, Speaking Up Without Tearing Down. When someone says, well, welfare parents don't care, it's tempting to call them out, isn't it? And to say, oh, welfare parents do care. There are other reasons why they may not be showing up at their school. But when you call somebody out, it can marginalize them, make them feel like they're not a part of the group, and get in this adversarial relationship with you as a facilitator. Now that's your choice. You may want to do that. We for sure need to respond to every racist, insensitive, biased remark. But how do we do that? This article makes some suggestions. One is to interrupt. So a person says something like that and you say, I appreciate your sharing, but I'd like to talk about this a little bit more. Okay, so you don't just let it go. Another way you could do that is to ask a question. Tell me more about the parents you're referring to. What do you mean by that? And of course, we don't say that defensively. What do you mean by that? Right? But with genuine curiosity about, let's talk about your experience. Asking them to tell me a little bit more about it also gives you a little chance to get your act together, because some things people say are shocking and you don't know what to do. So you respond and say, tell me a little more about that. Then they're talking and you're figuring out what you want to say next. This is a helpful one. Acknowledge and distance. Acknowledge and distance. So you could say, many people have similar sentiments. I appreciate you bringing it up so we can learn about what other sentiments our group may have. And then you open it up to the group. One of the best tips I know is what you don't know what to do, open it up to the group. Does somebody else have a comment? Does anyone else have a perspective about welfare parents? Chances are there are people in the group who want to combat those stereotypes with you and will help you. And often it's more effective than hearing it from the facilitator who's trying to be neutral and stay in the middle. So acknowledge it, but distance it from that person instead of attacking them. And many people feel that way. Let's explore that. Okay, it takes it off the person who said it. And the last one, humanize and contextualize. This is called bringing empathy in. Okay, we want to attach real people to their statuses. So you could say, We know that sometimes parents aren't able to be as involved as they'd like to be because of not having access to limited resources and managing competing demands. This is a reality of our poor and working class families, and we know that they're doing the best they can. That's also blaming the system or the structure, right? Instead of blaming a person, which is foundational to our anti-racism work. What is it about the structure that causes people to behave in the way they do? Okay, so that's a way to call in comments that are troublesome and insensitive. Another thing about environment is making it safe. We want to think about our trauma-informed training, trauma-informed groups, because we know we never can know who has experienced trauma. We use what is called universal precautions. This comes from the medical world. Because you don't know what might happen in the ER, you wear gloves as a universal precaution. So we always want to apply these trauma-informed practices. Safety can help a person who's been traumatized. Point out where the exits are. What's the schedule? Don't force anyone to share. Don't say, well, we'll go around the room and read. You may have a person who can't read, and that is traumatic. So you don't want to put someone on the spot like that. Choice, giving people a choice is a trauma-informed practice. So highlight people's strengths, give them choices of where to sit, share power whenever possible. You know, do we want to tackle this today or shall we do it another day, right? So you as facilitator can share power. That's a helpful thing. That goes along with collaboration as well. Everybody has a role to play. Focus on the relationship building and share power whenever you can. And then trust, keeping those boundaries, keeping those agreed upon guidelines. Those all can help have a trauma-informed environment. All right. A facilitator plans, guides, and manages. Another one of the best tips I know, and this is hard to do, is to learn to interrupt. We can say, well, that's not nice. This person has come here to the group to talk, you know, how can I interrupt them? Well, remember the facilitator is responsible for everyone in the group. So if one person is doing all of the talking, it is unkind and disrespectful of others in the group when no one will challenge them, when no one will speak up. So those gathering guidelines will help you and will help you distance yourself. You can simply say, I'm going to interrupt here to call attention to the agreements that we made at the beginning of the group. We appreciate your sharing, but we want to share the air. Remember, we said we want to give everybody the opportunity to speak. And a person who's really not aware of how much they're talking, you may need to just keep talking until they hear you and stop. So it won't usually work to say, just bravely go right in there and say, I'm going to need to interrupt here because I noticed that we're having a lack of time for everybody to share. Just keep talking, and the person will actually finally hear you and go, oh. I don't think anybody wants to dominate or take all the airtime, but especially in support groups, people have a lot that they bring and a lot to talk about. But again, you as facilitator, your job is to make sure the whole group has a good experience. And so that may mean you need to interrupt someone. Another tool that you can use for people who bring up topics that aren't on the agenda and want to go down a rabbit hole that is not part of what the group planned to meet, you can use this little thing called a parking lot. You put a sheet of paper up at the beginning when you're doing the ground rules. And so you have a place to honor what the person is saying, but keeping the focus on the plan agenda. So if a person strays into their favorite soapbox, you have this tool that can say, well, that's an interesting topic, but let's put it over here in the parking lot so we can come back to it outside the group. It's a way to refocus and bring the floor back to the topic at hand. And finally, I have some suggested responses to those difficult participants. I don't think we have many of these, but there are some in a group, and left unchecked can really impact the group. And other people may even stop coming because of difficult participants. And you remember that difficult participant needs a group as well. So let's explore a couple of these. There could be that hesitant one who never talks, right? You could put people in twos rather than having them have to speak to everybody. Let's turn in pairs to discuss this for a bit. Then after the person gets their thoughts together, come back to the group and they may feel more like sharing out loud. Or you could, if you're noticing the group, you could say, you look like you were going to say something. Sometimes people just need sort of an entree or a welcome to begin talking. What about that monopolizer? One that does all the talking. You could simply say, let's hear from someone who hasn't responded yet. Okay. Then there's the idea zapper. The one who, no matter what you think of, let's say you're planning an event, they say, that won't work. Oh, we've done that before. I don't think that's going to help. And it really can take the group down. So as facilitator, you could say, how do the rest of you see this? Again, that opening it up to the group to see if other people will self-correct. Yeah, that hasn't worked in the past, but we'd like to try it this way again. And if the person continues to be negative, you can say, I appreciate your point. That might be, but we're here to take some positive steps together. Okay. This next one is the clown. Someone who maybe because of their anxiety is always being cynical or clowning around. And you can just simply say, I'm not sure I understand what you're saying. Could you give it to me straight? And it just encourages the people to end that clowning around behavior and just give you your straight answer. And then there's that negative one. Here again, I say, you might have a point, but we're here to find constructive answers to these difficulties. And again, one of my best tips, whenever you don't know what to do, open it up to the group. How would anyone like to respond to that? Does anyone have ideas about that? Again, this also gives you as facilitator a little time to rifle through the tips in your head and figure out what you're going to do while somebody else is talking with them. And then if the process goes on too long, again, just simply intervene and say, let's have one more comment and then we'll move on. Okay, just provides a little guidance, respect, but some boundaries and some limits. If at all possible, try to stay in that neutral role. You're here to help the group, to bring everybody's thoughts and feelings to the table. So you want to try to avoid arguments or taking somebody on or debating if at all possible. Facilitation is an art, and you can practice this art. Reading the room, sensing when it's time to shift activities, or intervening when there's a troublesome participant. This is an art. And these things come with practice. A good way to start is to co-facilitate with a more experienced facilitator, and then ask for honest feedback as you develop your art. Many facilitators will be happy to do that for you. And here's my parting advice. Be free and quick to admit your mistakes. Errors in judgment are how we learn. Apologize, explain what you meant to do or say, and then move on. Most groups are gracious. They're glad that they're not the one facilitating, and they'll come along with you. And finally, be brave enough to serve the group. Don't apologize for maintaining order. That is something the group needs, and they've asked you as a facilitator to do it. Help the group stick to its goals and guidelines. The group is counting on your service. Okay, now I invite you to unmute if you'd like and ask questions or share tips and tricks that have worked for you. Or if you've had a problem in facilitation and you can't figure out what to do and you didn't figure it out at the time, and you're safe, feel safe sharing it, we could problem solve together. So anybody want to ask a question or?
Diane, this is Martha. When you use a parking lot, must you always bring it up again in, that item up again in a group? Or if you're going to handle it privately with the one who brought the idea, would you say, I'll talk with you privately about this later? How do you handle that?
Yeah, I think it makes a difference on what you say at the outset, isn't it? If you promise that we'll get to that topic again at the end, then you better do it because you promised, right? I probably would say, most times I would say, let's put that on the parking lot and we'll look at it again after the group, after the meeting or outside the group. So let's say that meeting ends early, which is unusual. You can look at the parking lot and say, let's see if there's another topic here we want to take up. But you're also protected because you said, we're going to do that outside the group. You can meet with the person later, or what if the person, Amira says, does not want to park and did not stop talking? Yeah, that's a really good one. Again, I would encourage you to maintain your facilitator role. It is your meeting. You've been asked to help the group stay with the guidelines. And I would just firmly say, even if you have to say it more than once, thank you for that comment. I can see that you really want to talk about it. The group agreed to work on these things today. So we're going to need to keep that on the parking lot for now. Who else wants to return to, yeah, the person may not want to parking lot their comment, but if it truly is outside of what the agenda is for the day, don't apologize for putting it there. You want to say more about that, Amira, or share from your experience?
No, actually, I don't have experience with that, but in some meetings, I hear some people like they have an idea, they just want to put it, they just want to say it, they don't care, you know, they just, even if they left the place after that, they just want to say something. And yeah, I was wondering like how you're gonna handle that.
Yeah, not everybody's as self-regulated as we would like, but the broken record technique is another one you can use. If you've said, we agreed to share the air and the people don't share the air, then you interrupt and say, I'd like to bring your awareness back to this ground rule where we agreed to share the air. It's okay to bring it back. Or if you parking lot something and they don't want to leave it on the parking lot, you know, you can say again, that topic is really important, but it's outside the group's work today. So we're going to leave it over there and address it outside the room. You know, you could just kind of keep saying what you're saying again and again.
Yeah.
Get it.
That's really helpful. And yeah, those are very wonderful information. So I like to memorize it actually. Will you put it like in a slide or something, or, you know, in an email so we can revise it again?
Sure. I will send you a copy of these slides because yeah, it does take practice. And I don't know, but if you're like me, but when a person is saying something offensive, you know, my blood pressure goes up. It makes me nervous. I'm like, I have to respond. What do I say? What were those thoughts again that I practiced? Yeah. So the more you review those and think about them. But again, remember that trick of saying, let's pause here. I wonder if anybody else sees things in a similar way. And 9 chances out of 10, there'll be someone who is not as nervous as you because they're not up front, and they can calmly think of a way to address that offensive statement, and then people can move on. Yeah, it's really trusting the wisdom of the group.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who else has a comment or experience or something funny that happened in a group they were in, or something awful that happened in a group they were in? And Diane, if anyone in your group wants to share, I can pop Monica out of the interpretation channel and she can interpret for us. Now, I know a number of you have good experience with facilitating, and I'd love to hear your tips. What do you do before a meeting is coming up? How do you prepare? What's one thing you try to remember?
I try to get myself in a calm place, and maybe that means walking around the building, or you know, just being really quiet before it's go time. Yep,
right. That's really helpful. And a lot of times I'm panicking at the end, right? Because I'm not quite ready. And I'm rushing around, and then you don't enter at a place of peace and calm, right? Yeah.
I think, Diane, it's important what you said too. It resonated with me about just trusting the wisdom of the group. I think that's important because in preparing and finding that peace, I think for me, kind of recalling what are the main goals today, and then kind of letting things go a little bit as they may, and drawing the group in, and yeah, like you said before, just leading in a way that allows everybody's voice to be heard. And yeah, so I appreciate that.
Do you sometimes during the meeting, do you call to mind again what the goals were?
Yeah,
Yeah. Mhm.
even if not externally, internally, and bring
Yeah.
that
Right.
to the group if need be, but it just kind of to keep me on track, on focus. And
Yeah. Nicole says she really amps up her listening skills when she's going to facilitate. And Sarah, I know you've been in a lot of groups. I try to make sure I'm well versed on the material that will be discussed, anticipate questions that might come up. Ooh, a good strategy. And answers that I might need to provide. Make sure I have the resources available that will make this meeting successful for everyone. I try to serve as a resource for the group so they can achieve their goals. Oh, wouldn't you like to be in a group that Sarah's facilitating?
Diane, I feel like a co-facilitator is very helpful, and you brought that out in a few things, but we don't often feel as a presenter or a facilitator that you have to know it all.
Yes.
You have to have all the answers, and that's not true. And your co-facilitator can be a support with that as well. And I feel like, it's okay to say, I don't know, but I'll find out too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great way too. And yeah, those co-facilitators are great, especially if you have it set up ahead of time that you can throw a question to them that has stumped you, right? And so let's say somebody says something startling and you're not quite sure what to do. You can say, Rachel, what do you think? And then Rachel's on the hot seat and you have a little time to regroup and figure out, oh yeah, this is what I want to say. Yeah, that co-facilitators are great. Mm-hmm.
Or, tell me more about that gives you an opportunity to think, well, that person is kind of unpeeling that onion.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anyone else?
I just have a question here about time, like how do you organize your time to say all the points and then questions after that and so on?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's a real learning, isn't it? And you can't quite know in a new group how much they're going to talk or not talk, right? But you can, in your planning, yeah, I want to take about 10 minutes for this and 15 minutes for that. When I facilitate, I often make a little notes on the side that says at 12:45, I want to be here. Or at 1 o'clock, it's time to move to this. Now that can change, but at least it gives you some little structure you've thought through, and you can say, oh, we probably better hurry. We probably better speed up because we're not going to get to the last topic or whatever. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yvonne says, I think it's very important as a facilitator to encourage attendees to ask questions. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you, Yvonne. As well as to express that every question is valuable, right? For sure. Okay, let me come back to this and I'll turn it back over to you, Jody, for our closing comments.
sorry, I got screens over top of my mute button here. But with that, we just thank you all for being here again today and look forward to next week. We hope you can join us. Actually, myself and my colleague Clementine Carl will be leading a conversation regarding shared decision making and how we can partner best with our providers to provide quality care for our children. So we hope you'll join us for that, and you can see the upcoming webinars there as well. So contact information is available here for the IFLTI core team. If you have questions that might need addressed after this meeting, feel free to reach out to Diane, Rachel, or I. And then again, just a special thanks to Angela and Dareen, our family planning partners who have joined us in planning this webinar series. So we appreciate you all being here with us today and look forward to next time. So thank you all.
Thank you all.
Take care.
Take care.